Hey there, everybody. This is Dan Fagella with BeatBiggerOpponents.com. I'm lucky enough to be on with a Jeet Kun expert. We've had interviews with respect to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, with respect to Muay Thai kickboxing, with respect to so many different approaches to civilian and military women's self-defense, but never anybody with GKD. And Matt Numrich has been lucky enough to be not only run a number of academies for something to the tune of 2 decades teaching this martial art in addition to others, but he's also been contracted out to everybody from the Navy, the Army, the Air Marshals, etc., teaching more the street fighting components and applications of GKD. So we're lucky to have him today. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Dan?
Doing really well. I'm glad to be able to have you on. I know you and I kind of caught up relatively serendipitously as I landed on some of your sites, and I just knew that GKD was an expertise area that we had not really touched on at all. I really wanted to start off with what you see as sort of the differentiator of GKD as an art. Part of the value of these recordings and the transcripts and whatnot for our readers are getting an understanding and a feel for things that they can learn about martial arts, but also being informed as to the arts themselves. They can understand what they want to train, how they want to train, and what the various pros and cons are. So give me an idea of what you think makes GKD different or unique.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you're talking about GKD, what really separates it from the pack is that it focuses on every single area of self-defense. And what I mean by that is that, if you take, let's say, 1,000 different fights, I don't care if you're talking about competition or if you're talking street fights and you're talking about, whatever, you can really separate things into 5 different areas of self-defense. And these are the 5. There's kickboxing,
Yep.
Range, there's close quarters combat. The third one is ground fighting, which obviously you're very skilled in. The fourth one is weapons. And then last but not least, you have what's called mass attack, or how to handle multiple opponents. So
Yep.
once again, you have those 5. Once again, kickboxing, close quarters, ground fighting, weapons, mass attack. And, really what separates JKD from the pack is that, is that we're able to literally adapt to whatever the situation calls for in a street fighting kind of scenario. And that just makes us, very, very, once again, adaptable to, once again, what our need is. And our need is street self-defense. It's not
Yep.
like we're preparing for a tournament or anything like that, it's once again trying to be multidimensional.
And obviously real deal self-defense applications. In terms of the name of the art, obviously a lot of people will know JKD simply from having its roots in the great Mr. Bruce Lee himself, and I'm familiar with the translation of Art of the Intercepting Fist. What is there to be said about sort of the name of the art and what that translates into the overall philosophy of combat? So I get that it's pretty darn inclusive. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu really focuses on a pretty, like the clinch game and then the ground game specifically, not so much striking. JKD includes more. What is that translation? Art of the Intercepting Fist. What does that mean for the philosophy and approach to combat?
Well, the funny thing is that, Bruce he never really even wanted to name this philosophy. I mean, most people know him from his movies, and some people are going to say they're bad movies or good movies, but the point is that, not a whole lot of people know him from this philosophy, and the fact is he really didn't even want to name this philosophy, because he figured that, once you go ahead and you name it, you label it, you categorize it, and he really wanted to make sure that this thing that was being created was going to be flexible enough to adapt to whatever the situation calls for. And I think that's a pretty cool thing, but once again, at some point, you got to name it something because you got to call it something,
Yeah, no, big time. And I actually really admire that about Bruce, simply because I think that you're right. I mean, there can be people that get trapped in it as a system and then don't think outside of it. And Bruce's entire philosophy was to be vigilantly open-minded and calibrating it to yourself as an individual. And like Ralph Waldo Emerson, who didn't call himself a transcendentalist, really didn't want it to be a thing, but wanted it to be, I guess for Bruce, it was really sort of the philosophy of GKD. How is that still alive today in terms of the integration of multiple martial arts? I know Bruce Lee studied fencing, he studied boxing, he studied wrestling, he studied jiu-jitsu. I mean, Bruce Lee was a master student in reading and in training and in all the various martial arts. Is that still something that's emphasized in GKD today? If somebody decided they were going to train it, are they still going to get a flavor for that? Is there some semblance of more of like a curriculum now? What does it look and feel like these days?
yeah. Well, I mean, the JKD philosophy, it's so crazy. I read a Black Belt article. This probably had to be sometime in the earlier mid 1990s, and it was talking about, some possible revelations or some things to prepare the martial arts world for in the near future. And I remember one of them specifically was that there was going to be a huge boom of Jeet Kun instructors because there was going to be such a huge boom of people wanting to learn Bruce Lee's martial art of JKD.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is that we're still a very, very niched kind of community. Many people, when you talk about Jeet Kun Do, yeah, they know Bruce Lee, they don't really know the philosophy or anything like that. But when you're really trying to get down to it, once again, it's people trying to realize, hey, listen, first of all, there's an art. So what does the art kind of contain, more or less? And there's where you have the rub, because you're going to have people really separate into two main categories. You're going to have people who want to go ahead and say, hey, listen, this philosophy that was created, it contains everything that Bruce created, and then once Bruce died, that's where that kind of evolution ends. Then you have the second group of people who say, you know what, it not only contains everything of that, but also contains then everything after Bruce's death, which is the continued evolution of the art. And what that means is that, think about, I always tell people, hey, listen, think about, let's say, basketball. Basketball, if you take a look how people shot a basketball, they would shoot it with an underhand kind of motion, right? Well, like as basketball, let's say, continued to progress, guess what? Then you have the people using the overhand shot. Now you have everybody from, Jordan to LeBron to everybody, using and shooting a basketball in so many different ways, where if you would take somebody who, let's say, practiced basketball 40 or 50 years ago, they would say, like, oh no, okay, that's basketball, but it definitely has evolved since then.
Yeah.
And so I think, that's what a lot of people, that's kind of the line of thinking that I am under is that, JKD has continued to evolve even after Bruce's death many decades ago. And, the way that I kind of justify it is that, once again, I use the example of, let's say, war. The way that people used to fight wars, even only, let's say 100 years ago, compared to how it's, how wars are conducted today, it's like a night and day kind of thing. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Yes, no, it does. And the same is said with hockey. The same is said with even freestyle wrestling. I mean, developments in training style and techniques. Some of it is trends and phasings of in and out, kind of what's popular, what's not. But some of it is actually discovering what tends to work best, what tends to be highest percentage, what tends to be the best use of leverage, what tends to be, if new technologies open up, such as they definitely have in hockey and in golf and in other sports that use, equipment like that. There's always those developments. So in your mind, there is still a large faction of people that have the JKD banner but are keeping the philosophy of that consistent evolution and integration alive.
Absolutely. I mean, I always tell people, if you want a good evolution of just how fighting evolves, go ahead and watch the first 4 UFCs and the last 4 UFCs.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see a huge evolution go on there. And obviously the UFCs haven't been along, for a super long period of time. I mean, obviously it's been a number of years, but it's not like it's spanned over a huge lifetime or anything.
No, it's not. It hasn't been a 200 years of UFC competition.
Exactly. And so, and so that's what I want to really want to make sure that we pass on with Bruce Lee's legacy is that he had the intelligence to realize that, listen, fighting is going to evolve just like every single sport, just like every single kind of, warfare. Why would hand-to-hand, kind of street fighting, quote unquote, evolve just like everything else has?
Got it. Okay, cool. And I'm glad that is still alive, frankly. I think that really for the people that know, I think what Bruce was about, not that I'm bold enough to say I knew the guy, but he was certainly a hero for me in my high school years and definitely an inspiration to get involved in the martial arts. And I think that vigilant philosophy is critical to any martial artist. So it's cool that that's still alive in GKD. It would be a shame to think that it was kind of locked into a curriculum now.